Hello and welcome to the Yogis Pod. My name is Dharmitra and I'm an Isha Hatha Yoga teacher at Delhi School of Yoga. I recently came across these research papers which are studying the impact Isha yoga practices have on a practitioner or meditator's physiology, psychology, and various other biomarkers. And since my college degree is in the trash can and I can't be bothered to look for it, we are going to be taking Saket's help to decipher and better understand these research papers. Saket has graduated from Birla Institute of Technology and Science, and currently he is a Ptsd scholar at National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. But first I thought we will set up a little bit of context for this, and I wanted to show you what the Isha Research Center is really about. Here it is, the Isha Research Center, Scientific Exploration of Yoga and Meditation. Health is not just being disease-free, health is when every cell in your body is bouncing with joy. Sadhguru says this. So we'll just go through the overview. I'll read it as it is. Yoga as a tool is a profound study of the human system. It offers a host of practices and deep insights into various aspects of the human body and mind. Isha Research Center aspires to bring a deeper understanding and awareness to the yogic sciences, practices, and their health effects on the human system through rigorous scientific studies. Isha Foundation has been offering classical form of yogic practices for over 30 years. A great number of practitioners have been reported a wide variety of health benefits, such as improvement or elimination of physical and psychological chronic ailments, elevated mood and energy, enhanced social competency, and a general heightened sense of aliveness and well-being. The mechanisms behind these positive effects, observed variabilities between practitioners, and the functional differences between various practices have been explored to some extent. Further extensive scientific research is required to unearth the health effects of Isha yogic practices, not only as a tool for symptom management or improvement, but also a potential holistic system to promote healing and optimal well-being. Isha Research Center is an initiative by dedicated volunteers who are medical doctors, nurses, and scientists by training. So we will watch this video why the Isha Research Center was created.
I'm Dr. Suresh Alankar. I'm a vascular surgeon at Jewish Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm part of the medical team for Isha's, has a medical team, a national medical team, and as part of that, we are looking to increase Isha outreach in the medical community. Isha Research Institute is now been formed. It is going to be the foundation for all the activities that will happen with Isha practices. It will also support the meditators who are interested in research. All the research activities that we do through Isha will be published on that. Meditation as a tool for stress and burnout is very well accepted even in the medical community. People in the West especially in the medical community, they want evidence-based research. They want to see whether this practice has been proven to help. Anecdotal experiences are not enough. We all know it helps, but unless we show objectively that it helps, it is difficult to sell this to the medical community, to make them convinced that it works. So when the researchers in the team, they were trying to conduct studies and applying for grants, one of the problems they encountered was, the questions that were asked was, what is the proof that this meditation works? And we could not show that proof. It is for that reason there's a big gap that we found, and that this research fills that gap. And this research is crucial to show that these practices work. Most of the meditators in Isha have noticed changes, and that's why we are dedicated volunteers. Most of the medical meditators in the research team are also very dedicated volunteers because they've seen profound changes. I've been with Isha since 2011, and if I can look at my life before and after, it's completely different. I thought I was doing great until I started doing the practices. After a year later, when I saw the changes in me, that's when I realized how much I was lacking. Still have a long way to go, but it has definitely brought a lot of positive change in my life. as a surgeon in my family wise and things that happen in the family at work and all that, stress was a part of it. And I always thought stress was a part of life. And I thought I was doing very well managing the stress that I was doing until I started seeing what Isha offers and what Sadhguru offers, that there is a life that's possible without stress. And it's been a fantastic experience throughout.
All right, so there are quite a few studies available, and in this video we will be discussing one such study. So yeah, let's invite Saket and get started. Okay, namaskaram Anna. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much.
So let's get right into it. The first research article that we'll be discussing is this one that we had listed here. The yoga, meditation and mind-body health increased Bdnf. So Sadhguru had, I think, referred to this particular research article in his recent video also.
Sure. So namaskaram everyone. So this was one of the papers published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience Journal, which is a very good journal in the field of neuroscience. So this was done by Rail Khan and others. It was carried out in the University of Southern California. So this study tried to understand the impact of 3 months of yoga and meditation retreat on various inflammatory markers, cortisol, and also Bdnf.
Right.
So let's try to understand what this means. Like, first of all, let us try to understand what was the study about. So in this study, 38 individuals were chosen to participate in this 3-month retreat. And before the retreat and after the retreat, they tried to analyze these markers of neuroplasticity, which is Bdnf, and inflammatory markers like pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and other anti-inflammatory markers like IL-10, and also the analyzed cortisol, which is measured, which is called as cortisol awakening response. That is the levels of cortisol which is seen early in the morning.
Mm-hmm. So this is relating to stress. Cortisol levels and stress are something which is...
So cortisol is related to stress, and Bdnf is related to neuroplasticity and also kind of brain health, you can say. And inflammatory cytokines, obviously, for the immune system activation. So
right. So I also saw that somebody was mentioning this, that Bdnf, they termed it as the fertilizer for the brain. That sounded a little peculiar, but then I got the point that they're referring to the Bdnf leading to more connections between neurons and more synaptic connections, and also neuronal growth overall, right?
Right. So Bdnf is actually called as brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is one of the crucial factors for neuronal growth, survival, as well as regeneration. So these levels are disrupted when one is stressed out or anxious or depressed, and Bdnf levels go up when one is very calm, relaxed state, leading a very peaceful life. And exercise also leads to improvements in Bdnf. Meditation has been shown to improve Bdnf. So this is one thing which they analyzed in this paper.
Yeah. I would like to ask you later on, after we get into the impact of Bdnf by the practices that we do, how much different is the impact that yoga has? Like, is there a difference in degree, or in a certain way that physical exercise leads to this thing? Certain foods lead to increase of Bdnf.
Yes, even diet leads to
right. And even I have even heard that your psychedelic substances like LSD and psilocybin, this also leads to an increase in Bdnf. So what I would like to understand is by how much is that, if we compare it, like is consuming that going to give you more Bdnf, or the yoga is going to give you more Bdnf?
Yeah, that's a good question, because even certain drugs have been shown to improve Bdnf, but what it does is it leads to, in the long term especially, it makes one more vulnerable to various psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia,
Right.
for example. So although temporarily it does make
Right.
some changes, but in the long term, it has a very detrimental effect on one's cognition and also one's overall behavior. Whereas something like, say, exercise also leads to an improvement in BDNF, but it's really not known how much is the degree to which exercise and yoga differ. So as far as I know, it's like yoga, for example, in this study, they showed that BDNF levels increase by over 2 to 3 times.
Right.
Uh, and it is more long lasting in the sense that meditation leads to something called as trait changes. So, for example, if somebody practices meditation for a long time, that itself will lead to these changes, which will influence all other aspects of one's life. How one talks, how one sits, how one interacts with people, or every small aspect of one's life it impacts. And that also, that might not be the case with exercise. It might not have an overall impact on other aspects of life. So maybe in that way it differs. And one more thing is, exercise and say meditation, yoga. Exercise is mostly done not mindfully. It's that mindfulness component is missing in exercise. But whereas if you take yoga, the critical component is one needs to practice these asanas with proper awareness of breath, awareness of one, where how one is moving the body, all these things. These also have a very important role when it comes to BDNF levels, because yoga has several components to it. One of which is, the way the body is moving. Another is mindfulness. Another is the breath alignment, everything. So there are several factors which lead to improvement in BDNF, whereas exercise is one factor, which is the impact of the actual physical exercise.
Right. Is there a correlation between BDNF and neuroplasticity? Because we are going to go into a different paper which discusses neuroplasticity on its own. But is there a link between these two as well? Because
Yes, and BDNF is one of the important factors for neuroplasticity. So first of all, let us try to briefly understand what neuroplasticity is. So neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to, continuously learn and adapt. So our brain is not rigid. It's so malleable in the sense that every experience that we have sculpts the brain.
right.
So so in that sense, neuroplasticity is a hugely empowering factor, because right now most people think that if because of genetics or life's experiences, people think that this is how I am, I cannot change myself. But neuroplasticity is empowering because
Freedom.
it gives certain power to your own life. It's like you live your own life. You can uh, design your own life the way you want it, because you can choose your
Right. Right.
experiences consciously.
Yeah,
Usually
coming back to
what
the point you were mentioning about exercise. So this is, of course, this depends on various disciplines in fitness, because there are various disciplines. And um, what I have heard in recent times, people in certain, people who are practicing movement in a very general sense, they are actually looking into mindful movement. So not just brutish lifting weights, although there's nothing wrong with that, but people are going into that. And it's interesting that how
right.
that connects into neuroplasticity as well. Because I don't know, I haven't actually seen the research paper or no. I've just heard people talk
Yes.
about this, that if two people go to the park and both of them don't know how to juggle, and they learn a new skill, say juggling, and in 30 days only one person actually gets how to juggle, the other person doesn't even, by the end of it, he still doesn't know how to juggle, but he showed up every day and he tried it. So the growth, the changes in their brain were actually
Yes.
similar, just because they attempted to do something new.
Exactly. This is one thing which is seen across, actually, not just juggling, even other aspects of one's life. Whatever it is, the effort one tries to put in, that is more important than the actual outcome of the whatever effort that is. So one thing is the first time this was observed, neuroplasticity was in London cab drivers.
Okay.
So these London cab drivers, because they have to remember so many streets while they drive, studies showed that they had very high, large volumes of this particular brain region called as hippocampus. So this is the brain region responsible for spatial navigation. So that brain region in this London cab taxi drivers was much higher compared to non-taxi drivers. So that was when the neuroplasticity was first observed, and then after that, many studies showed this neuroplasticity ranging from exercise to mathematics to music, learning music, now meditation. So anything which is done, which is done with a certain, with certain effort and certain conscious behavior leads to neuroplasticity. In that sense, there's one thing which is important to mention, that is whatever we do, it can either be done on an autopilot mode or it could be done on a conscious mode, mindful. So whatever is done on an autopilot mode, it doesn't have much impact on the brain because you're operating out of the the memory patterns in the brain. Whereas when something is done consciously or mindfully, that because it is effortful, conscious is not easy. It needs certain effort. Wherever this effort is involved, there is this recruitment of brain regions which are involved in this conscious behavior. Like there's a brain region called as prefrontal cortex. This is which is present here. This is the one which is especially very important for any kind of mindful or conscious movement. And these are the brain regions which are also shown to have larger volume in long-term meditators. So these are the studies, like fMRI studies, are the ones which will give these insights. What they do is they ask these meditators, long-term, short-term, and no meditation practice people, to enter the MRI scanner, and then they scan their brain. So, and then what they observed is all these long-term meditators have large volume, actual large volume of prefrontal cortex, as again, something called as dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and compared to controls, those have no meditation experience. So this indicates that neuroplasticity is very high in those regions which are involved in mindfulness and conscious.
Okay, so
etc. And this is one more thing. This is the one. This brain region, prefrontal cortex, is the one which declines rapidly with age. For example, if somebody is not doing anything active in their life, starting 30 years or so, this region starts deteriorating. It atrophies, actually, the volume decreases. And then if it decreases to a very large extent, then it might even manifest as something like Alzheimer's disease when one is in 70s and 80s. So meditation is one of the very powerful techniques which will prevent this decline. It will arrest this decline. So age-associated decline is not seen.
Right. So I think Sadhguru was also talking about this in his recent video, that how, we see this in our regular lives, that people who get older, unfortunately, they become a little senile. They know they are very specialized, they may be very educated, they may know their, subject or whatever field of specialization very, very well. But some disconnect with reality starts to come in as people age. So this could be something that, their ability to actually perceive reality and respond in a very, take in each moment as new and respond to it accordingly is somehow taken away, because the response is always rigid and structured. So one really, usually I don't give into these cheap Instagram posts, but I saw this one post. It was quite appropriate for this. So they showed this guy who's walking in circles. So he's walking in circles, and they show in the next comic panel, they show that he's still walking, and as he's walking in the same circle, he's digging it. It's like he's digging a trench, a circular trench, and he keeps walking, okay. And then he's, completely inside that hole he's dug. Now he cannot come out. So it's like your patterns And what you're just
Okay.
used to doing constantly, it brings this
Yeah.
rigidity, it's against freedom in that way.
Yes. So yeah, that's a very good example actually. So in that sense, what happens is like because it becomes so rigid, everything becomes so rigid. People even think that uh, their life is not in their hands. Like somebody else is guiding their life. It goes to such an extent. So
Right.
meditation is one method by which one can come out of this pit and take charge of one's life. Um,
Yeah. So we could get back to the actual research paper. So as you were mentioning that 38 individuals were taken. The mean age was about 35 years old, and 3 months of yoga and meditation retreat they went through, which is actually not
yes.
a lot. 3 months is I would like to see something done on somebody who's done this for like 30 years maybe.
Yeah, 3 months is a short amount of period, but those who were recruited in this study were already
Oh,
experienced
right,
practitioners.
right, 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 right. Okay, okay.
So this was mostly to understand what very intense meditation practice does. For example, most of us who practice meditation, it's not intense in that sense. Maybe we practice for 1 or 2 hours per day. But this is a group of people who were living in the ashram in the US for 3 months, practicing everything, having a proper diet. Diet is a very important factor when it comes to.
So, is this from the Anaadhi program? This is from the Anaadhi program, right?
Uh, yeah, I'm not
It's not
sure because
mentioned.
it's not mentioned
Okay,
here,
okay.
Anaadhi or not. So this is, and they practiced everything from samyama practice to shunya, hatha yoga, and linga sanchalana practice also.
Okay, this was there in the
This
US?
was in the US.
Yeah, so this is from the Anaadhi
I
program.
think so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Sadhguru would be there with them throughout these 3 months.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And
Yeah, yeah.
what they did was they before the retreat they took their blood sample, and
Right,
after the retreat they took their blood sample and then they analyzed all these parameters.
right, right. So
So
the biomarkers that we are following, of course, BDNF we are taking a look at, and other biomarkers.
yeah, they also looked at certain psychological questionnaires, which has depression, anxiety, and also mindfulness. So in the depression, the scores dropped from 3 in the pre-retreat to 1.26 post-retreat. That's the mean depression score. So one thing which is interesting is that the baseline score itself is very low. 3 is a very low score actually for depression, and
Right,
this further declined post the retreat. Same thing was observed even for anxiety. The levels dropped from 3.76 to 1.21. And mindfulness, which we've been talking about, this increased from 39.6 to 44.5 post retreat. So basically, they became more and more conscious about their daily behavior,
right.
their ways of being post retreat.
So yeah, yoga does make you happier.
Is happy and also more mindful in the sense that they become more mindful about not only what they're doing externally but also more mindful about what is happening in their own mind, like becoming aware of thought and emotion as they arise.
Right.
As they become more aware, they can regulate it much better. This is one thing which is not seen in those with no meditation practice. That is, there is more mind wandering which is seen. So there's a particular brain network called as DMN, which is default mode network. This is the one which is active when one is in autopilot mode. One is daydreaming, autopilot mode. It's basically living in the head kind of thing. So when that is there, this default mode network activity goes up. That is, they don't know whether they are, thinking about the past or future. So they might be thinking about something in the future, and they might think that that is an accurate description of reality. Because of that, they might suffer uh, what has happened, or they might suffer what may happen in the future. So this distinction between what is reality and what is not reality is lost.
So
With
your
meditation,
own mental monologue and narrative, you are sort of, going through emotional upheavals, fake
right,
scenarios in your head, as they call it.
right. So this network activity goes down with meditation practice, default mode network activity. So there is an increase in the attentional networks. There are a lot of networks in the brain. These are called as intrinsic brain networks. So one of which is attentional networks, frontal attentional networks. These frontal attentional networks increase in activity following long-term meditation practice, and this default mode network activity
Right.
decreases following meditation practice. So, and this is correlated with DMN activities, correlated with stress, anxiety, depression, many forms of psychological disorders. So, this mindfulness increased uh, in these meditators following the retreat. And yeah, and then they also analyze these biomarkers,
Yeah.
Bdnf, IFN gamma, TNF alpha, and other pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory cytokines.
What are these exactly?
This also they observed. Yeah, so BDNF, as I told, it's a
Right.
it's a crucial brain factor which is responsible for neuroplasticity, growth, survival, differentiation of neurons, which declines with age and also which declines with stress and depression, anxiety. These levels, it's a robust indicator of brain health. So this BDNF levels increased threefold following the retreat, which is a very uh, high increase in the sense of that. And then they also looked at these inflammatory cytokines. So these inflammatory cytokines are the ones which are responsible for various aspects of immune system activation or deactivation. So when it comes to immune system, it is important that it is in balance. It should not be overtly active, or it should not be less active. If it is overtly active, it leads to autoimmune disorders, for example, very high immune activity. If it is very low immune activity, then all kinds of infections, say COVID-19, all kinds of infections
The possibility
can
increases,
come
yeah.
very easily. Possibility is very high. So if there's a proper balance between these, then it indicates that the person has a very strong immune system activation. So this is what they observed in this study, in the sense that this is one of the only studies which found an increase of both pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory cytokines. In the sense that, for example, anti-inflammatory is IL-10. This IL-10 levels increased from before the retreat to after the retreat, from 3.46 to 4.25. And other, so this indicates, this makes sure that inflammation is not on an overdrive. It keeps the inflammation in check. And whereas pro-inflammatory cytokines like IFN gamma, TNF alpha, they increased, indicating that the body is prepared to handle any kind of challenge. So there is this balance between pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory,
Right.
which is crucial for immune system activation. So generally what happens is, if somebody is very stressed out, it leads to very high inflammatory burden. So it's fascinating that stress-induced inflammation is implicated in 8 of the 10 leading causes of death, starting from cardiovascular disease to diabetes to cancer, even cancer. So if somebody is stressed out for a very long time, it leads to this inflammation. And this inflammation, if it goes overdrive, it leads to all these disorders. So in these people, all these people who are chronically stressed out, anti-inflammatory cytokine levels are very low, because of which it goes overdrive. So that is
Right.
the one which is
Right.
increased in these meditation practitioners,
So, yeah,
in
go
these
ahead.
retreat people. And yes, they also looked at this cortisol awakening response, uh, which cortisol, as many people know, is a stress hormone. But actually, it is not a stress hormone. Why it is called a stress hormone is because those who are stressed out chronically, this cortisol levels increase. But cortisol is very important for our daily behavior. For example, if somebody is running, then cortisol levels increase. When somebody is doing any cognitively demanding task, then also cortisol levels increase. So cortisol and stress is not a very good, it's not a good correlation. Instead, what we should be looking is this cortisol awakening response. So this is the increase in cortisol which happens in the morning. So it's like just before waking up in the 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, cortisol levels rise in the body, indicating that it's like uh, it is preparing one for the coming day. And the more awake one feels in the morning, for example, some people when they wake up in the morning feel very active and alert. Some people still feel groggy, and that kind of sedate feeling is still there. So those,
So, natural cortisol levels are reduced in such individuals.
yes, in those who feel groggy and kind of still feeling sleepy out even after they wake up, for them
Right.
this cortisol levels will be low. So those who participated in the retreat, this cortisol levels increased. If you can see the graph, that's at 5:15 a.m.
Yeah.
At 5:15 a.m. post retreat, the cortisol levels increased. Uh, the one in the white is the pre-retreat, and one you see in the black is the post-retreat. So this post-retreat, the cortisol levels increased. So basically, they became more and more alert in the morning, more awakened in that sense, and also what this indicates is enhanced stress resilience. It's not so one is uh, it's like even one is facing very challenging situations, one is able to deal with those challenges in a much effective and efficient manner because of this enhanced cortisol awakening response. So overall, this increased CAR, increased BDNF, and the proper balance between these pro and anti-inflammatory cytokines indicates very robust, immune system activation, very good stress resilience, and very high levels of well-being. Can we just go to the evolutionary thing a little bit,
Sure, sure.
how it happens?
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, what cortisol does is say like long time back when there used to be many physical threats. For example, if you are going in a forest, there's a tiger which comes at you, you have to run. So in that instant, your skeletal muscles need a lot of energy. So the source of energy in the human system is glucose. So what the brain does is it releases this cortisol, which activates a pathway called as HPA axis, which is hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So this anticipation of stress, anticipation of challenge, that is the tiger, activates this hypothalamus, which releases certain hormone, which then activates the pituitary gland, which then releases another hormone, which goes and acts on the adrenal glands on the kidney. And then this releases cortisol. This cortisol recruits more glucose to the skeletal muscles. So the skeletal muscles have more glucose, and then because of which you can, if you want to run, you can run immediately with that boost of energy. So parallelly, what happens is there's an activation of sympathetic nervous system. So this cortisol response and the sympathetic nervous system, they kind of coordinate with each other. So when you have more glucose supply, you also need a heart which is pumping harder.
Adrenaline also has a role here?
Adrenaline. Basically, what the sympathetic nervous system does is it releases adrenaline, and this adrenaline acts on the heart, it activates certain receptors, and then it increases the heart rate. So more blood is supplied to the skeletal muscles, which are overactive. And also the lungs, it also acts on the lungs, because of which the breathing rate increases. So that the overworking muscles need the more oxygen. This oxygen is supplied by the lungs. So this mechanism, and also the pupils dilate.
See better.
That is the symbolic, so that you can see more clearly. And so because it is responsible for all these survival related things, what the sympathetic nervous system does is it dampens whatever is not required at that moment. For example, digestion is not required, sexual activities that not required. So all these things which are not essential for survival are dampened down, and only those things which are important at that moment to deal with the challenge are activated. And then once the threat has passed, that is once you have the tiger threat has gone, all this will come back to the baseline. The heart rate comes to the baseline. The cortisol levels also will come to the baseline. Now the major problem is, so this is the ancient the evolutionary mechanism which is evolved to make sure that we survive. Now the problem with human beings is that this same mechanism is also activated when one just thinks about a threat. Now there's no tiger. You're going to the forest tomorrow morning. You anticipate a tiger, which might never be there. So just because of this anticipation, the brain releases cortisol, and the heart rate increases, and all these things happen. You have an interview tomorrow morning, you have an exam, you have a public presentation tomorrow. All these are something which is the mind is making up. But the brain, it can't differentiate between what is a real threat and what is a psychological threat. It just mixes both, because the brain is not yet evolved to differentiate between these two threats. So the response is same in both these cases, because of which the cortisol levels are high. That in that context, we say that stress leads to increased cortisol levels. So if you put it in context, cortisol is a very good thing because it enhances survival. Only if it goes out of control, it is a bad thing. So now, if this mechanism is activated over and over again, this anticipatory threat, or it could also be past, whatever something threat happened in the past that you are experiencing right now, as we see in PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Something would have happened long back, but the same thing is, in this moment,
sort of.
It is replaying kind of thing in the mind, which the brain is producing cortisol over and over again. This kind of things also lead to decreased stress resilience and increased cortisol levels. So this, so basically what I'm trying to tell is that this cortisol is a good thing, but only if it goes out of control, it's a bad thing. And better way of talking about stress and cortisol is about cortisol awakening response, not actual cortisol, because a lot of discrepancy in the baseline levels. For example, somebody might be having a very high baseline level of cortisol, but not at all stressed out. Somebody might be very stressed out, but still be having less cortisol level compared with those who is not stressed out. Overall, to summarize, what happened is this study tried to understand what happens with intensive meditation retreat, that is 3 months of meditation retreat. So they measured psychological questionnaires pre and post retreat. They measured Bdnf, they measured inflammatory cytokines, and they measured cortisol awakening response. So they observed decreases in anxiety and depression, post-retreat, increase in mindfulness post-retreat. They observed a higher cortisol awakening response in the meditators post-retreat. They also observed 3 times more Bdnf levels. So this increase in Bdnf level could be because of several factors. One is increased attentional engagement. Any kind of meditation practice, attention is a crucial element. So in these intensive retreats, attention is like very high for whatever one is doing. That is one factor. Another is increasing vagal tone. So with meditation practice, increase in parasympathetic nervous system takes place and decrease in sympathetic nervous system takes place. So there's also a link between this parasympathetic nervous system and BDNF. So more one is relaxed and calm, the more BDNF is synthesized and secreted in the brain. And the third factor is the diet. Diet plays a very important role. So in that sense that studies show that all these foods like processed foods or even meat actually, all these things are inflammatory in nature. They activate the inflammatory cytokines like pro-inflammatory cytokines, and this inflammatory cytokines are negatively correlated with the BDNF levels. So diet in that sense has a very great impact on the BDNF levels. And the fourth thing is the environment in which they were living. It was because it's a retreat far away from the urban place we live in. That itself has a very good impact. For example, just by being in close contact with nature, the relaxation improves, and then because of that, the BDNF levels also increase. So this is what they observed when it comes to BDNF, and when it comes to the cortisol awakening response, they observed an increased cortisol awakening response in the morning. So this indicates enhanced stress resilience and greater well-being. And finally, they observed an increase of both pro-inflammatory cytokines and anti-inflammatory cytokines.
So this wraps it up for the first study. We will be going through more of these in the subsequent videos. Hopefully you found it interesting, and see you in the next one.